Welcome to the Channel Surfers, where we help channel executives and sales executives alike do their jobs better by educating them on our experience in the channel and sales and having great guests on like today, which I'll talk about in a minute. I am John McCabe. I'm the co-host, and I'm always joined by my good friend and fellow co-host, Jeff Lennon. How you doing, Jeff?
John, I'm doing fantastic, man. Super excited. We're past the Masters. We're getting into some good golf season right now, but even more so, I'm excited about our guest we have on today, a good friend of yours. So really excited to learn a little bit more,
So, Jeff, most companies think revenue problems are sales problems. Our guest, Neal Dooly, has lived both sides, finance leader and fractional CRO. So today we want to unpack what's really going on. Right now, Neal is running a company called Successful Selling Advisory, a fractional CRO, and he has a few clients, but we'd like to introduce him today and welcome to the show. How you doing, Neal?
Hi, guys. John, Jeff, pleasure to be here. Really excited, delighted about Rory's win as well. I'm the founder of Successful Selling Advisory. It's a go-to-market advisory firm. It's a data-driven organization, and ultimately we help B2B SaaS companies build sustainable revenue models.
Love it. Wow. And you're a perfect guest for our show because we like to examine, we feel channel is a sales role, not just a entertainment position. Right. And Jeff and I have a history of, probably close to 50 years combined in sales and channel. So we like hearing the chief revenue officer side of things when it comes to channel. So with that, let's go on. Maybe before we get started, Neal, give our audience just a little background on who you are and how you got to where you are now with the fractional business.
Yeah. So I'd like to think my career has been divided into sort of two parts. So I started off as a chartered accountant and trained with one of the big four, KPMG, and was predominantly in, back middle front office roles for about 11 and a half years, primarily in the asset and wealth management industry, primarily down in Sydney in Australia. And then I moved over to the dark side. I moved into sales with Gartner and Salesforce, and then went to a Salesforce customer and built out a partner and channel program, growing revenue by about 89% over 3 years and built out a team. And then that role was changing, and I just didn't really feel a desire to stay there. And I was doing some study in climate tech and different things, and obviously the world's turned to custard in some respects around saving the planet and being green and climate tech. So I was at a school reunion, and a friend of mine just said to me, "Hey, can you come and do a bit of advisory work around that?" And it was a pre-revenue organization, SaaS company, and I really enjoyed it. And I started saying, this is something that I really like. I'd always wanted to run my own business, and this was an opportunity for me to do that. And that's how I ended up. And I worked as a sole trader first, and then set up a company. And now it's, you're flying the plane as you're trying to grow it as well.
Oh, absolutely.
We cannot argue with that. That we agree wholeheartedly with that statement.
Well, there's an old commercial from, I think it was EDS, right, where they were building the plane as they were flying, right? So it's not uncommon. But well, look, first of all, man, I was checking out your background. Super impressive. You've also confirmed the fact that we should probably go to a reunion at some point because it could turn into a lead. But what I'm hoping to get out of this, after looking at your background and seeing the journey you took, what I'd like to hopefully give our listeners is some practical steps around, how you address the forecasting, how you improve the handoffs and build that repeatable model, because that's something that I took away just from reading your profile. So if you could kind of talk and then if you want, I love 2-part questions. Also kind of your back, like you just kind of gave that story, but what kind of led you to want to be like in this role that you're in now? Is it just, did it come naturally?
Yeah, so maybe I'll answer the second question first, and then you can repeat the other one because
All
I
good.
have
It's
like
all good, man. It's all
you know,
good. As I'm spinning the
I
questions in my head.
suppose just how I got here. You know, when I was in school or when I was in college, I loved numbers. I loved accounting. It was like my
Yeah.
strongest subject. I love maths, and that naturally drew me into an initial career in there. But I also deep down felt to myself as I was going through, various different companies, working as an accountant, that ultimately, if you wanted to be a leader, whether you stayed within that business or even outside, you
Mm.
needed to be able to sell the product and connect. So I felt that to be ultimately to sort of, I suppose, have the skill set of a true leader, you needed to understand the numbers, the balance sheet, the financial report,
100%.
but also be able to sell it. But also, what the benefit for I felt when I had such great success at Gartner was that it was all about selling business based outcomes. And I know over the past 15 years we've been in that age of grow at all costs. SaaS is people were just buying SaaS products off the shelf. There wasn't a huge amount of selling. Now it's very much going back to there has to be a business based outcome for someone to invest, and that's where I feel that I'm able to help my clients get them to start thinking about what's the business based outcome here. Yes, it's a great product, but what's the business benefit? Is it driving costs? How is it driving costs? Is it increasing revenue? Is it helping them on the compliance or the regulation side, or is it potentially helping shareholder value?
Damn. Well, I don't know if you realize, but you just kind of answered that first part of the question, right?
Yeah.
Which was, what are some of the steps that you've taken, which you kind of highlighted right around how do you help people tighten up their forecasting to improve the handoffs,
Mm.
for that process so that you can build that repeatable revenue. I heard a term used a couple of weeks ago, the pipeline theater, it was called. And
Yeah.
it's a real challenge. And I kind of got that from reading through some of your background. So what are some practical things that you look to do or help people to identify that there's some theater that's going on with their pipeline?
Yeah, I think like two of the methodologies I subscribe to are value selling and medic. So I believe there has to be an initial qualification tool around your pipeline or your data
Hmm.
hygiene. And value selling really really resonates with me because there's obviously the business value. How's that? But then there's also the personal value. You put yourself in that person's shoes. How am I going to help that person be successful? And what changes if they don't get my solution by X date? And then in terms of using a medic or a medic like framework in some of my customers is around sort of what are the key questions that I need to
Hmm.
ask at every stage for us to move to the next gate. So one of my customers came to me recently and he said, "Hey, we're having a qualification issue. I'm getting brought, and he's a founder in an early stage startup. He's coming in to doing all these deals, and they don't know the sign off process, or they don't know he's chatting to the wrong people. So sales are bringing the founder in too early, and that time is valuable. So that's again, they're not asking the right questions at the right stage, and that's potentially a training issue, or maybe it's a lack of knowledge.
Love it.
Mm. So, Neil, Jeff and I are in the fractional business as well. We have a fractional channel executive business, and we have clients. But I always find like when you're proposing to a client, fractional has sometimes it's a positive, sometimes it's a negative. I think companies want that full time employee. I think they feel like they have more control, or they feel like fractional, your hours aren't going to be 100% dedicated to them. But if you do the same work and you get the same results, what do the hours matter? You could hire someone full time and they could sit on their rear ends playing golf, eating lunch, drinking beers, and not do half the work that we do. So do you find that same resistance when you're proposing your fractional business to executives?
So, John, sign me up for that role you've described because I'm all in if that's the role that's going. Because yeah, I'd love to have that role, but to no, I think
I'd love to have that role too.
in short, the answer is no. I'm not. It's look, it's a relatively nascent movement, certainly in Ireland, Europe. We follow the US that trend, but I think now I may have mentioned, like it's no longer grow at all costs. It's all about sustainable revenue. It's all
Mm,
about profitability. So having access to a proven operator at a fraction of a cost, that at minimal risk, hands off on the execution, the ability to be laser focused. You're buying
mm,
that experience.
yeah.
Their guiding principle. It's starting to get a lot more traction. I typically work with my clients that are anything from half a million up to 10 million, sort of 15 million ARR. And that's sort of where the people I'd like to help. And the reason why I like to help them is because they're moving from that founder led sales to
Mm,
having that repeatable motion. And that's where I love building that sort of process, building that framework to allow them to have scalable growth.
mm, interesting.
So
Wow.
do I get pushback? No. But in terms of, is there sort of an education piece and why it benefits them? Yes, there is. And people do like having people bums on seats and things like that. But, you have to be a little bit flexible around how that operates. And maybe instead of sort of doing one day on site, you could, what one of my clients, I work with them one day a week, but I said, look, I'll be on site working on a different client, but I'll be in the office. I'll sit at my desk. So if the team need me, I can be there. I can be there for them. And I've noticed even in the 2 weeks I was doing it there recently, there was a huge uptick in terms of the interaction with the sales team, marketing, customer success, putting in meetings. So yeah, it's really beneficial.
So you're
Damn.
telling us you can't be replaced by AI because you're going into the office and being there in person. Is that what you're telling us?
AI can't wear Hawaiian shirts.
That's right.
It's going to look a little goofy, but no, you're
Yeah,
right.
yeah. No, I think um I suppose AI in some respects it's always going to impact, advisory work. You only have to read the headlines, but at the end of the day, AI is going to accelerate a poor prompt or a poor lack of knowledge. I have vast experience, vast frameworks, go to market OS I use as well. I'm a certified partner with them. So having that proven, and they've used companies like Zoom, HubSpot, Clary. So proven best practices, and you're leveraging them to, and advise on that. AI is not in the room to advise you and be there to answer different questions. Yes, you're going to be prompting, but AI can't pick up sentiment. I know
No.
we previously discussed about that, but just in terms of the
Yeah.
white of the eyes, etc.
No,
Damn.
you're right. You're right. So
And just sorry, one other point. I think also there's plenty of revenue out there for everyone. AI is going to take a component. We're all going to grow, and it's just how you're going to grow together successfully.
not to pivot too much, but I read a lot about AI and sales and how it's streamlining and making your job a lot easier and reps' jobs a lot easier. But it's not a replacement for that body and that face-to-face, interaction and the trust. I don't know how many people really trust AI right now, but if you go into an office and spend the day there and you're there to answer questions and you're there and, in the flesh, that builds trust, right? And I think AI is just not going to be able to replace that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think AI is, the I don't have the data, but I'm sure the influx of AI products, it's all around sales process, sales
Yep,
efficiency,
yep.
sales effectiveness, and people are inundated, whether it's a Dripify or something like that. They're inundated with all these generic LI LinkedIn messages,
Mm,
and yes, you can use your co-Claude and your agents and things like that, but I think you use automation and AI to an extent, but you still, I think, should bring in the human touch, because at the end of the day, people buy from people. That's why we're chatting. That's why we're connecting.
That
That's why we're
absolutely.
in.
1,000%, man.
Yeah.
1,000%. So I kind of agree with that. And look, first of all, I just happened to listen to the CEO diary thing this morning, and it's all doom and gloom, right? I get it. There's two different aspects to AI, and but what I do find interesting, I think you kind of nailed it, is the fact that it is going to help us kind of take some of the mundane things and fix it. I also believe, call me crazy, that we're probably one of the most unique species to ever be on the planet, and we're very adaptable. People freaked out when the computer came out and replaced the typewriters, right? It's like,
Yeah.
so I get it. And do I know what's going to happen? I don't have a crystal ball, but here's what's interesting. So if we make it more, I'll say, like, programmatic, right? So how do you make a partner program more programmatic and part of the actual operating system and not necessarily an add-on? And then we can talk about how AI can help kind of streamline that and make it work. But knowing what you're doing in your background, I'm just kind of curious, like, because this is, for me, it's a big focus on where's the channel going and how are we selling? And people are a big part of that. But how do we make the partner motion more of part of a operating system for a business and not the add-on piece? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and look, if you maybe even separate the AI piece out of that question,
Perfect.
you sort of think where
it's a layer. It's a layer over here. It's an ancillary layer. I agree.
Yeah, no, I think ultimately, and I was chatting to is it Asher Matthews and partnership leaders about this, and we were sort of saying, like, where does channel strategy usually break? And I think it's around the misalignment and being misunderstood internally and externally. And yourself, we've all worked on the channel piece, and you think channels treated very much as an afterthought, not treated as a proper revenue channel.
Agreed.
And you hire a channel person or a channels leader or even a channel salesperson, but you give them no resources. You don't give them the budget. You don't give them the ops. You don't give them the tools. You give them a Google sheet that they can connect. They can link in with their partners. So. And I think ultimately as well, what I was mentioning from partnership leaders, they were saying, look, as a chief revenue officer, you need to be very clear about what benefits you want from the channel. So you should be thinking about channel program, and you're going, okay, the channel program, and this is sort of the misalignment pieces. You go, look, my business objectives, my business goals are revenue by X. And this is how I'm getting it. So I'm getting 80% from direct, 20% from partner, or 90% from direct, 10% from channel. But channel's now at 2%. So it's going to be now pre-sales stuff, or you just have to align it to your goals, and then the CRO goal priorities have to be aligned to the partner, or the partner program has to be aligned to the CRO goals.
That's a good point.
Priorities. So really, it's that there's just not enough, I think, understanding as well of the people, and guys, you would know, working on both sides of the fence. Sometimes direct sales don't value the value channel, as much as they should. And if you really have an effective channel program, you know that you're going to win bigger deals. Your deal cycle is going to be quicker. You're going to actually open up some of these big accounts because the partners actually hold the keys to some of these big financial institutions and things like that. And it really should be. It's like when you have that silo between marketing and sales. You go, why? It should be, and I know we're sort of going off topic here, but one of the areas
that's good. Great. You don't want to silo organizations within the company. Like marketing and sales and channel should all be working as one.
Yeah, and that, it sort of goes back to sort of even having like a session. If you start, what I try and do about, and sort of, the 60, 90 days, you have an alignment session, and you bring out whatever sales methodology you're doing, and you get customer success, you get, rev ops if it's there, or sales ops, you get marketing, you get sales, and you get them to identify what's your ICP, and bring it out and start talking about, and using, the medic sales cycle, or even sales methodology, or the challenger or value selling, and you start talking about, okay, how do we win these customers? Let's fill out some some formulaic, some formula to win these ICPs, and you get everyone in a room, and that's a great way to align it. But if they're not aligned, then things are going to break down.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and I love what you said about I love what you said about how expectations from a company standpoint, executive standpoint, for the channel is, build pipeline and help close business, but then you don't get the resources that you want, right? I work for companies where they refuse to let me hire, or I couldn't buy tools to do my job. I had to do everything kind of like on a shoestring, right? So as a CRO, I hear you saying, like, you identify that channel is important. It's a part of the sales organization. Like, how would you approach it if you were like, say you were hired to run, you're the CRO of one of the biggest companies in the world, and channel is a a vehicle that you can utilize. Would you provide those tools to the channel, or would you have a different opinion because you're running a bigger organization, you have bigger criteria to meet?
Well, I think it goes back to even when I started off in sales. You have to set your team up for success. And it's like when you hire a salesperson, I think you should do the proper enablement. So I'm just saying, you do the proper resourcing. So you resource that team, you make sure they're enabled. So you get to have a partner program. So there's certification, there's enablement. You give them the tools for deal registration, the marketing development funds. So even for a salesperson, and this is again, like, you bring a salesperson on, you properly train the person, you give them maybe and I'm a great believer in a full cycle AE. I'm not a great believer in sort of the SDR, BDR piece. I think there should be a full cycle salesperson, but you give them an existing account that they can work on. They understand why they're buying your solution. They understand, the challenges of the solution, so they can start articulating that to their new audience and get up to speed quicker and faster. And also, if they're with an existing client and there's a bit of run rate there, it gets their confidence up. They're happy. They're making a few bob, and it's all about moving forward. But in terms of the partner program, it should be the exact same. Give them the access to that. But again, you have to start at the why do I want this partner program? Why do I want it to succeed? How am I going to achieve my revenue target? Okay, what's my breakdown? And then also you need to be you need to be very diagnostic about the partner program that's existing there. And I know I'm sort of going into something here. It's you think about, okay, number one metric is sort of ARR. Some people say NRR, and then you look at the revenue versus the program costs, and then you're comparing, and then you start, if you want your partner program to succeed, or if you're at the channel program, what you should be looking at is your CAC partner versus direct, the win rates, the deals, the velocity, all those metrics, and start using that data and you bring it to life. So I know when I ran that successful partner program at Apex Group, I was using the data from partners to sort of say, look, when you bring a partner into this, our win rate increases by 15%.
Yeah.
The deal size is X. So you straight away, you're giving the data to say, hey, to this, or any leads that come from these partners, we usually close, or any deals that come from these guys, they don't close. So what's the issue there? That's maybe it's a re-education, maybe it's enabled, or maybe they just don't care about us. So maybe we should be deactivating them.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Yeah, I like that.
So I do have a question, and John, you will probably laugh at this, and I haven't said that in a while. So see, he's not. I didn't even ask the question yet, and he's talking.
I can tell what it's going to be.
So, building a part. If you go in, right, so you're going in to help an organization. What do you think is the best time frame or the predictable time frame for a channel program to be solidified to be successful? Not necessarily first dollar, because you could have some low-hanging fruit, an anomaly deal that hits, but building out a channel program, working with a client and helping them build out that structure. What does a typical runway look like for you? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? To be able to say, okay, we've got it built, it's now repeatable. What does that look like?
Well, look, let's just assume you have a repeatable sales motion on the direct side.
Okay.
So let's say you're 2 million in revenue. You've got 30 deals as opposed to 2 million in revenue from 3 deals. So you sort of know that you've got existing customers, you're getting there. I think the investment in channel, again, it goes back to sort of the benefits. What do I want to get out of it? But I think in terms of the initial looking at a channel partner, there is I would need to think that there has to be like at least 3 active partners that are able to successfully sell your solution, or they're bringing in the deals at that stage for us to sort of engage. But if I was engaging someone and hiring someone, obviously they need at least a year to get up and running. But I think in terms of depending on where the program is, I think I'm a great believer in having like an MVP. So just having like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just have
Yeah.
the nuts and bolts and just get up and done. Because I think if you're trying to design a program and you're doing that, you got to make sure the rubber hits the road straight away. And I think you're better off just having a few things. And I know I haven't properly answered the question, but I think there's going to be gates along the way. And I think there needs to be, let's say, again, the benefits. We want to have partners activated in the DAC region, or we want to have partners activated in, West Coast of America.
Yeah.
So there's going to be certain benefits. It really depends on where you want to grow. Is it like deal registration? Is it activation of partners? There's all different time frames around that.
Well, first of all,
I think you have to do the activation and enablement. Sorry, I think activation and enablement comes first before pipeline growth, because they don't understand how to sell your product. They're not going to sell it no matter what you do. So I think that comes before. But I think what you said was very relevant. I would ask also, not just like, what do you expect the time frame for a successful program to yield fruit, but as a CRO, what is your temperament and your time frame when you're trying to build this new program and you have channel on board? What is your expectation as a CRO?
Since we're friends here, I'd probably lowball my expectations. But I am impatient as well, but I'm realistic. So I'd be sort of thinking like, this needs to happen yesterday. We should be already getting some deal revenue. But I think, and it goes back to sort of let's just say the sales cycle is 6 months. It's an enterprise deal, or sorry, mid-market deal. You're sort of saying, right, for the partner program to be successful, you'd like to think it's probably up and running within 9 months, I think. So you sort of have 3 months of them finding their feet, getting up to speed, and then they've got the 6 months of where there's deals starting to go. You've got ICPs there. They can copy that. They can copy that motion.
Right.
They know who to target. They can cross-reference that in terms of the partners who they're targeting as well. So there's I think also, because we have a lot of data out there, we have AI, it can help people do that market analysis very quickly. It can become a lot leaner. It's again going back to what I mentioned at the start. It's around no longer growing at all costs. It has to be profitable growth. So having a lean process, having a lean program, focusing in on maybe a certain subset of partners. Maybe you look at resellers, or maybe you look at referral partners, and just going after them one by one, and then building the scale on that. If you go after all of them, 9 months, you won't have anything to show for.
And I appreciate your honesty there. And I think 9 months is not, is very reasonable. But that's the kind of answers I think we were looking for. Not, I didn't want you to fluff us. That's a realistic, honest answer. And look, it's not, it's an expectation, I think, that should be set with the channel, builder, right? And I don't know if that's always the case. And I'm just wondering, like, in your experience working with CEOs, like, do they have unrealistic expectations? Can you help them understand the whole sales organization build process and success, criteria, or are they, delusional and think it's going to happen tomorrow?
Look, I think with the target audience that I work with, everyone thinks their baby is beautiful in terms of their product. So, and also they think it's, they've been very successful in terms of how they're selling, but how they know the product intimately, and sometimes it's harder for them to, for them, so they can't understand how a salesperson can stand. So there is a disconnect between, going from that founder-led sales to, a partner-led sales. And then obviously, so there's always going to be disconnect, and they need to, and also, unless a lot of the organizations I've worked with, or I work with as well, they don't necessarily be coming from that, leadership in the SaaS world. They don't really have the experience of channel, so they don't have the appreciation, the nuances of it. Like, partner sales is a tough gig, because, if you're direct sales, you can control everything. You have a lot more control over that.
Sure.
Partner sales, you're disconnected. You've got so many other variables. You're relying on, you're relying on the AE to close. You're relying on your customer to sign the deal. You're relying on, your partner team to deliver. You've got plenty of variables there. So it's a difficult role. So do they appreciate it? Not really. And I think it's also, that's probably maybe my skill set in terms of being able to maybe look at a complex situation and simplify it and break it down. And worked as a financial advisor for a number of years, worked mainly in the equity market. And really that was sort of, I felt that was one of my skill sets. I was able to sort of break down to my clients who were typically pre-retirees in terms of, why this is a good investment and why we should do that. And that was during the global financial crisis. So it wasn't an easy role.
Well, no, I just wanted to come back. First of all, your answer, in my opinion, was perfect because you hit on 4 things for me: the current structure, the focus of the channel program at the time, the maturity of that channel program, and the context of it. And it sounds like, Jeff, that's a lot of fluff. Everybody's going to have there is no silver bullet. I think that's what I took from your answer. It's let's understand where you are today, what you're doing today, how you're doing today, and how what that looks like. And then we'll figure out where the revenue is. Do we need to break everything and restart? Do we need to tweak things? Right. So I did love that. So I want to throw that because you also made another comment. So my question would be, for anybody out there right now that's working through a channel program and they feel stuck, what would be 1 or 2 things that you should say they should probably start to look at to help them? And this is from a CRO's perspective. Like, hey, if you feel like things are stuck and they're not moving, maybe here's 1 or 2 things you might want to, open your eyes to take a look at.
Yeah. And I'm not being smart about this, but I would need to look at the data. I'm a very data driven. So it's really around just to sort of look at the data, so the data helps you map the results around, and then you're going to use your experience and your gut to sort of go, okay, well that's right or that's wrong in terms of what's wrong with a partner program or a channel program.
That's tough. What about a metric? Let me ask you that.
No. Sorry, I'll just what you really need to sort of, it goes back to, again, it's really that, what are we hoping to get out of the program?
Okay.
What's our direction? What are our goals? Okay. So, we want to activate these 10 partners. What are we doing? Why aren't we activating them?
Got it.
Or, or maybe there's issues with, let's say we only have 5 partners and one partner is bringing us all the deals, and, all those deals, they're crap. So, what does that mean? That's a re-education issue. That's an enablement issue. Then the other piece is, we need to investigate why these guys aren't, they're activated, but they're not registering deals. Why is that?
No, I like that. I like that.
Do we need to throw some marketing money at them? Do we need to bring them out and get to know them? Do we need a face-to-face? AI isn't going to do that.
Yeah.
No, I think when you said you need to see the data, you and Jeff became best friends right at that moment.
Okay.
So great answer, by the way.
Well, and it's, I think someone asked me yesterday, a client had said, look, you've been in this space a number of years, Neal. What do you believe differentiates yourself? And I said, you know what? I actually think I'm a data-driven chief revenue officer. And I suppose, and you can chat to all your friends and your leaders, and a lot of them hate being leaders. They love being leaders because of the paycheck and the money and getting that, but they hate being, spreadsheet jockeys. But I grew up being a spreadsheet jockey. I was an auditor for 3.5 years. So understanding process, building things, validating stuff, that was all, that was food and drink to me back in the day. And so I've sort of come full circle. So now I'm looking at spreadsheets and analyzing data, and that's why AI is brilliant. You can upload your spreadsheets and help you analyze it and run scenario testing and all different things. So it's really exciting.
Absolutely. No, dude, this was, well, first of all, John's right. I mean, the data is important, but you said something else, and I'll just throw it out there to people. It's a math thing. You reduce things to the least common denominator, right? Simplification, right? And I've mentioned this many times in the podcast we've done. you got to be able to simplify it so that, you know, a 10-year-old can understand it. Not that you're trying to talk down to people, but you want to make sure that you truly understand it. So you're able to take, and the data sometimes will give you that information to say, you know, we're running around, we're chasing our tail. We just need to go look at these two things. Let's go do these two things because that will fix 80% of our problem, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
no, that was a good answer. I appreciate that.
I think even if you look and say, you know, typically as well, like you know, you go into a role and you're asked your first 90 days, and you know, you have an agreement with your client, and you say, this is what we're hoping to achieve. Okay, this is what I'm going to do over the first part of that engagement should be always baselining. So getting that, you know, getting your status quo or your what's wrong, what needs to be fixed, and it has to be based on data as well, because the CEO is going to have a view. This, you know, the head of marketing, or you know, the head of customer success, or the sales reps. Everyone's going to have a view. So you obviously, you're bringing in their viewpoint, but also it's enshrined in the data, and then from there you can look at the data to actually understand where the other friction points is and help you around the alignment. So then you could look at, say, okay, again, going into the channel, our win rate's really poor. Why is that? Is it, you know, and then you look at, okay, we're not targeting our ICP, or, you know, different simple, you know, and I am simplifying.
Let's get back on track. 100%.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're coming up on the bottom of the hour here for the recording. So, Jeff, do you have any of your 3 points to take away from this?
Well, first of all, my 3 things would be: number one, be pragmatic about your approach, right? And the devil is in the details. I think, you know, that's my biggest takeaway, but it's really about just understanding that you're trying to build a repeatable process and have a methodology, right? And going back to one of your things, the value selling in Medic, big believer in Medic. You know, I've been through the spin and the Challenger, and you start to read stuff, and you've probably seen this. You're like, they're kind of taking a little bit of this, taking a little bit of that. But that would be my 3: is have a process. I love the value in Medic selling. And then just really take a moment, devil in the details, and be pragmatic. Look at the context of what you're working with. So,
yeah.
So,
Neal, we want to thank you for being our guest, and you did a phenomenal job. I think some of the best answers to our questions we've had on the show, and very honest. Now, for our audience, Neal is in Dublin, in the great city of Dublin. If you want to, the audience wants to reach out to you and talk to you about your fractional business, or, you know, talk to you about what we talked about here on the show, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, just send me a DM or connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to do it at the moment. Or just, if they can, just put some context in the message so I know what it's about, and then we can take it from there. If I sort of, you know, I ultimately as well, probably, I know, Jeff, we were talking about data a lot as well, but I would like to sort of say, like, to all my revenue comrades out there, look, I believe we have the best job in the world.
Sure.
It's also one of the loneliest, because, as you know, if you miss your forecast, you miss your target, no one wants to be with you. But when you're winning, it's the team sport and everyone's behind you. So being a CRO, whether you're fractional or not, it's a heavy seat to sit in. But as I've always said about the data as well, like the data is your map, but it shouldn't replace your instincts. And, you know, you've got a wealth of experience. So, you know, leverage that to make your decisions. And I think also the final other thing I would always say is, maybe 2 other points is, one, like, be human. You know, look, sales it's an emotion. It's tough.
Sure.
Help people out. People want to succeed, whether you're in channel or direct. And I would also, you know, never stop being a student. You know, constantly evolve, understand things, practice AI, practice your medpic, your value selling, all those different things. And you know, if anyone's out there and they're looking for a chat, or they want to understand in terms of how best to scale a model, or their revenue model, I'd love to have a chat with them.
That's awesome.
Well said. And, you know, I think that saying, heavy is the head that wears the crown, you just articulated that. But I want to make one point to the comment you just made here. Like, if you're a channel executive and you're working with a CRO, you should be locked at the hips and be in lockstep with them every step of the way. The team aspect you just mentioned, that's a part of it. It shouldn't be separate, shouldn't be going in your own directions. You should be a part of every conversation sales has regarding the pipeline. And if you do that, I think you see success. You know, I've worked with some great CROs. I'm still very good friends with them, and we had, you know, amazing relationship, and we built and grew, right? So,
Yeah.
but Neal, thank you so much for being
John,
on the show.
John, just one quick point.
Sure.
And it goes back to the alignment piece. You know, that's why channel breaks a lot of the time. There's a lack of alignment.
Correct.
It's seen as an afterthought. And when you hire an executive in the channel, they should be part of the conversation with the CRO. It shouldn't just be when you're doing your forecast deals or your pipeline forecast. It shouldn't be just direct. It should be channel are part of this. You know, this is the number we want to move, and that's what it's in. So it is important. So sorry to interrupt there, John.
No, not at all.
Awesome.
Another great point. Worth the interruption. But yeah, we just want to sign off here and make sure everybody can reach you. Do you have a website for your business?
No, not. I've been very fortunate. It's been a lot of word of mouth. UK. I'm operating in UK, and I predominantly can do some remote stuff, maybe on the East Coast if people are looking for me. But I haven't, and I suppose it's a work in progress, shall we say?
Fair enough. That's
Awesome.
great. Well, again, thank you for being our guest. Very insightful. Jeff, thank you for joining me again to co-host.
Pleasure, man.
For our audience, if you need to get in touch with us, once again, our website's www.channelsurfers.com. There's a contact us form there. You can reach out to us to be a guest or to give us feedback or, suggest a topic that you might want to hear about. We also have a LinkedIn page where we post our most recent show every Tuesday. Jeff is the master of the marketing and posting for those LinkedIn notices. And you could find us on pretty much every podcasting service out there, except for Spotify. We have a little issue with Spotify. We're working through it, but we're on every service you could imagine out there.
Yeah, I'm going to give Rogan a call, see if we can get some help there, but just kidding. Just kidding.
Nah, that's fine. Until our next show, thank you everybody for listening. And again, thanks Neal for being a part of this.
Yes. Thanks, Neal. And everybody, be curious.
Cheers.